Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 60, Chapter 60, entitled All Might. Toshinori tapped the pen against the desk, getting an annoyed look from Cementos. Sheepishly, he smiled and stopped tapping the pen. His thoughts drifted back to the conversation he had with Midoriya Monday. The fact that his successor was related to his predecessor. That somehow Inko Midoriya, despite the age difference, was Nana's sister. Toshinori wasn't sure if it was half-sister or such. Doing some mental calculations, he figured Nana would have been about 54 now. A 13-year age difference, which seemed like a lot, but he did know that Yuichi Shimura was fairly old. His thoughts turned back to his successor, and more than that, the boy's mother. He grimaced. Inko Midoriya unnerved him. Though he knew it wasn't her fault, she ended up in such a state. Thoughts drifting, he remembered the first time he met her. Placing the gift in his bag, he gave a smile to Midoriya, crouching down. "Young Midoriya, while I appreciate the gift, you don't have to get me anything." Midoriya stared at him with wide green eyes, and gave a small shrug, not responding. Toshinori gave a fond smile. His successor really was too nice. He would just have to keep telling Midoriya. Toshinori grinned at the boy who had the potential to be his successor, explaining that he had a plan to gain him muscles. He saw Midoriya look over it and frown, biting his lip, not speaking, though it was clear he had a question. Toshinori frowned slightly. "You have a question?" The boy shook his head. "Is something wrong?" Again, the boy shook his head, but Toshinori saw the tears gathering that the boy was fighting to hold back. Worried, he crouched down. "If something's wrong, you can tell me. I won't judge." The boy chewed on his lip. I can't cook all this," the boy stuttered out. A note of alarm went through him, but Toshinori pushed it to the side for a moment. "I didn't expect you to cook it. Are your parents unable to cook you meals?" Izuku nodded, not looking up. "All right. How about I talk with your parents, and we can figure something out. If we need to, I can have someone deliver the food you need so that you can get the proper nutrients you need." The boy stared at him with wide eyes, and then there was movement, the boy shaking his head and waving his hands frantically as his mouth opened and closed. "My boy, you need proper food for this plan to work, and it's my job as your mentor to make sure you get this food if your parents are unable to provide. Don't worry, my boy. I'll take care of it. After all, I am here," Toshinori said, buffing up momentarily to reassure the boy. He saw how Midoriya eased a bit, his eyes watering again, but this time it seemed more out of happiness, so that was okay. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, hoping to further reassure the boy, but he flinched away. Toshinori hid a frown, but retracted his hand. Maybe Midoriya was one of those people who didn't like to be touched by new people. "When would be a good time for me to come over to meet your parents?" Now's fine," Midoriya answered, not looking up at him. Toshinori still smiled. "All right, let's go figure this out." He followed Midoriya and soon arrived at the boy's apartment. Midoriya opened the door. "Mom, I'm home," he called out in a soft voice, his stutter lessening, perhaps due to being more comfortable at home. The apartment remained silent, but Midoriya didn't seem bothered. "A guest is here, Mom." Silence, but a moment later he heard footsteps and he saw her coming down the hall. Her expression was blank, and she shuffled along. The woman stared at him, and if he didn't know better, he would think that she couldn't actually see him. Her eyes didn't focus on him at all. Midoriya turned to him. "She's listening. I don't know if she'll say anything." Pushing aside his unease, he started. "Midoriya-san, I'm Yagi Toshinori. I'm mentoring your son and preparing him for the entrance exam." No reaction so far. "In order for us to make the most progress, your son needs a specific diet." Still no reaction, and he realized that if this was normal, then there was no way that she could cook, and Midoriya hasn't mentioned a dad yet. "I would like your permission to have his meals delivered for the next 10 months. No response. Toshinori glanced at Midoriya, shifting a bit to the side as his unease got the better of him. But then a movement caught his attention, one single nod from Midoriya-san. She agreed," Midoriya said. That's all she can do today. It's a bad day." "What about your dad?" Toshinori questioned. Doesn't live with us," Midoriya answered. Toshinori swallowed. Midoriya lived with his mom like this. Surely this couldn't be good. This wasn't right. Making up his mind, he decided that he would have the food delivered, but he also needed to talk to Tsukauchi because he wasn't sure if this was, well, legal for the boy to live like this, because it didn't seem like his mom was a suitable caretaker. With his mind made up, he left his successor's apartment. "All Might, we need to talk," Mike said, walking up to him and pulling Toshinori out of his thoughts. Immediately, he swallowed. "This isn't another talk like Aizawa gave me, right?" Mike snorted. "No, but I don't think this one will be any easier either." Toshinori deflated mentally and nodded. Mike gestured for him to follow, and so he did. Once they were in a private room and Toshinori was sitting, Mike started. "I talked to Midoriya-san Wednesday night, and she mentioned something I think you should know. And since you weren't here yesterday," Mike, despite holding a laptop, crossed his arms, holding the electronic to his chest. Toshinori shrunk a bit. "Sorry, I was asked by the police to come over for a case they were working on." Mike nodded. "Then I won't get onto your case for it this time, though next time you should email us if you're out. Anyways, here, listen." Mike opened up the laptop he was carrying and placed it down. Then he clicked play. "Midoriya-san, do you need something?" There was a small pause before a distant voice responded, as if from far away. "Izuku is quirkless." "And why is he quirkless?" "To be safe. Izuku is quirkless. Quirkless is safe. Quirkless is happy, free. Izuku is free." "Safe from who?" "Not safe. Izuku in danger. No being a hero." "He's in danger?" "Can't be a hero. Being a hero reveals Izuku. Heroes are dangerous." "Who is a threat to Midoriya?" There was a rustling sound, likely Mike's leather jacket being moved. "All for one. Please, protect my son." Toshinori stilled, inhaling loudly as silence fell over the room. His nemesis had something to do with the Midoriyas, something that made Midoriya-san feel like she had to have Izuku be quirkless in order to be safe. Which meant that she had known of him over 11 years ago. Toshinori had looked into his nemesis's past quite thoroughly, and the fact he knew nothing about this meant he had a gap in his knowledge. Just where did Midoriya-san fall in? Was All for One the cause of her accident? From what he knew, it happened to her about 6 years ago when Midoriya was 9. It could have been before the big fight. Toshinori tugged at one of his bangs. He was missing something. A lot of things, really. "Tell me everything you know about Midoriya-san. Everything she's told you," Toshinori asked Mike. Mike opened up a folder. "Most of our conversations are recorded." Soon Toshinori was listening to the unsettling woman, his mind whirling with questions. What did All for One have to do with the Midoriyas? What caused Midoriya-san's accident? Who was Midoriya's father? Their talks came to an end when the bell rang for classes to start that day, and Mike went to go teach. Toshinori didn't like this. First, All for One is back, despite the severe head wound that should have killed him. Then he had apparently had something to do with the Midoriyas. What was he missing? He frowned, wondering if perhaps it wasn't just the Midoriyas, but because they were related to Nana. Did All for One know that, about the connection, and that's why he did something that caused Midoriya-san to be scared, to reveal that Midoriya had a quirk? Did Midoriya-san know what quirk her son had? Know what he had before Midoriya was 4? While not impossible, most people couldn't afford to do the test to find out what a person's quirk was before the quirk activated. In fact, those tests were also extremely limited, unless there was an illegal or unofficial test going around. Toshinori sighed. He would be getting no answers just sitting around. But he also couldn't do anything right now. After all, he had to prepare for afternoon lessons and teaching 1B. Heading out of the room, he headed back to the teacher's lounge to get ready for the afternoon. The morning passed, and at lunch Nezu called all of them to an impromptu teachers' meeting. Toshinori arrived and immediately wondered if the villains had done something. Nezu was furious. His beady black eyes were cold, and he was letting out low growls, his fur raised. Toshinori promptly sat down and kept his mouth shut, as the other teachers arrived. Aizawa came in, his own face hard, which gave Toshinori the only clue he needed to know, that Aizawa had an idea of what was happening. Ed Midnight was biting her lip. Either she knew something, or had another matter on her mind. The only two who didn't show up were Mike and Ectoplasm. Nezu folded his paws and placed them on the table. "Ectoplasm and Prism Mike have been suspended." Silence. You could hear a pin drop. It took a minute before someone spoke up. "What happened?" Vlad King questioned. "Ectoplasm has been suspended for an indefinite amount of time, and might be fired after further examination for targeting students and destroying personal property." President Mike is being suspended for 2 weeks for attacking ectoplasm. There were shared glances, faces going pale at the blunt statement. Then Nezu spoke, giving them further details of what happened. The meeting ended, with the end of lunch bell, and the teachers returned to their classes. Toshinori heard the rumors flying around the students, the ones who had been privy to ectoplasm and Mike's fight, telling the other students. Though Class 1A was oddly silent when he saw them in the halls. The class walked as one, Midoriya and Kaminari at the center, and the others surrounding them. They weren't smiling. Ectoplasm's actions had ruined the kids' trust in UA. They were protecting themselves in case any other teachers decided to attack them, or maybe not just the class in general, but Midoriya. Toshinori couldn't help being relieved that young Midoriya's class was so protective of the kid. He just hoped that none of the other teachers would hurt him like ectoplasm had. Toshinori knew that he was being petty, but he was glad Mike had been rough in his arrest. Though he understood why Nezu had to punish Mike, he wondered if Mike felt guilty for what he'd done. Toshinori privately thought that if it had been him, he wouldn't have had the same restraint as Mike and would have Texas-smashed ectoplasm out of the school. Hurting children was something he could never forgive. It was worse in that it was Midoriya. He could almost hear Aizawa commenting about favoritism. Toshinori would never point out that he thought Aizawa was being a hypocrite, though he also knew the teacher wouldn't let it affect how he taught them. He treated all his students the same during school, but he definitely had a soft spot for Midoriya. Trust was a two-way street, and he wouldn't have been able to get Midoriya's trust without the boy picking up signs that the teacher trusted him in return. Toshinori sighed and got into his car to drive home, focusing on driving instead of letting his thoughts continue to distract him. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 60 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 61 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.